Welcome to the Know Your Legacy podcast. I'm your host, Vipul Basanya, and today's guest is Jordan Montgomery. Now, Jordan is a keynote speaker and performance coach and trains and mentors Fortune 500 companies down to entrepreneurs. He's also had the pleasure of sharing the stage with legendary individuals such as John and Bert Jacobs, and also the legendary Hall of Fame individual, Aeneas Williams as well. So it's a pleasure having you on, Jordan, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, V. I appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
No problem at all. So the first thing I want to actually ask you before we get into any of the questions is, what's it like living in Iowa? Because I've never been out there.
It's a far cry from where you're at in London, but I enjoy it, man. I'm born and raised in Iowa, so in the middle of the United States. Grew up in sort of a small town, 2,500 people, farm country. But I think it taught me how to appreciate the simple things and the small things in life. And so I had a great upbringing. We live right outside of the city of Iowa City, which is where the University of Iowa is at. So I'm about 3.5 hours west of Chicago in small town Iowa.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. No, I definitely got to come and check it out if I ever come to the US, because I've never been to the US actually. So it'd be good.
You never have been. All right. We got to change that.
Yeah, definitely. But so I know you do a lot of, as I said in the introduction, you do a lot of keynote speeches and performance coaches for various individuals and organizations. So from the sort of training that you've done up to now with the Fortune 500 companies, especially, I'm interested to know what do you think they need most help with? What do you find that they seek your help for?
Yeah, I think a lot of the work that we do, Via, is really helping people see outside the box. It's really stretching their mind about what's possible. So much of it is outside perspective, like there's the adage of you're never a prophet in your own land. So you can be the greatest leader that's walked the face of the earth, but when people are around you every single day and they get used to you, sometimes they need a reminder, right? Added perspective, stretching the mindset, helping people think more deeply about where they want to go. We spend a lot of time talking about vision casting, thinking about the 20-year picture. Most people can think about, next quarter and next year, but a lot of people struggle with the 20-year plan. And I would submit and argue that everybody should be thinking about their 20-year plan. Hard to do, hard to get our arms around that. If you ask people about the 20-year plan, they kind of look at you like you're crazy, but it's a powerful question. So, I like to ask that question. What's your 20-year plan?
Yeah, definitely. It is a powerful question. And I think, this is basically what the whole idea of my community and this podcast is about, is legacy. Because that's essentially what you're alluding to, is thinking about the long-term goal. And what I'm curious about is actually, how did you actually come up with the idea that that's what you wanted to provide training and sort of coaching for, that you found was missing? Is that something you started thinking about for yourself as well?
Yeah, well, first off, let me say I love the work that you're doing around legacy, something that unifies us as people, right? As we're always thinking about, we want to leave this earth better than how we found it. And so credit to you for your mission and starting this podcast. I love the work that you're doing,
Yeah.
V.
No, that's humbling to hear. Thank you.
Yeah. So, I heard, I was 22 years old and I heard a guy speak. His name is Matthew Kelly. And Matthew Kelly's written many books. The Dream Manager is one of my favorites. And Matthew Kelly talks about the power of a vision. And he explains that the longer period of time that you think about, you're paid in direct correlation to that time. So he gives the example of a McDonald's restaurant, right? McDonald's is known all around the world. So a decent example here, talking to you across the Atlantic Ocean. But he says the McDonald's drive-through worker is paid a small hourly wage to think about life in 60-second increments, right? So they're evaluated and they're judged on the next 60 seconds. The McDonald's store manager is evaluated and graded on that day, okay? And they're paid a little bit more. And then you've got a regional manager that oversees the store manager, and that regional manager is evaluated on a quarterly and on an annual basis, okay? And then you have another 1 or 2 steps, and then you make it to the CEO, okay? So the point is, at each stage, as the time period expands, so does the hourly wage. The CEO of McDonald's is committed to thinking about the 20-year vision, and the CEO is paid $38 million a year. So it's just an interesting correlation, but we can kind of break that down to the individual just to say, hey, you are going to be compensated in this life. You're going to be taken care of in this life. You're going to be rewarded in this life for your ability to think more deeply about the future. And if you can expand the time frame that you think about, you can oftentimes accomplish so much more.
That's a very interesting way to see the relationship between time and money. I've never heard it being put that way as well, because most of the time when we think about earning money for ourselves and becoming a millionaire and wealthy, you think, okay, I need to work for myself and have business. I think that's what most people think about, but you never
Mm.
think about the amount of time and the vision that you need to put into that, and how that's correlated to the amount of money you make. So it's not. So I guess then the people that try and make money overnight and do get rich quick schemes is because they're specifically for that reason, looking at what am I going to get in the next week or the next month. They're not casting out that vision as a visionary like someone like Steve Jobs would, who then would, as a natural byproduct of thinking about that long term, make that sort of money that he makes, which is probably in the billions.
Yeah,
So
that's correct.
that's very interesting. So what I don't know if you can share, but where have you seen the vision lacking the most for certain organizations and companies that you've gone to?
Well, I think as a general sense, V, I think our world lacks that. We need more vision casters on this planet. We need more people to challenge thought process, to help people think more deeply about their future, about what's possible. We get caught up in annual business plans. And again, if I told you to write your 20-year business plan, you look at me like I was crazy, right? And most people do. But I believe people buy differences, not similarities. So I want to be the individual that challenges people's thought process, not on next quarter or next year, but what's your 20-year plan? And we always challenge people, if they don't have a 20-year plan, they need to write one, because everybody should be thinking about, their long-term future. Stephen Covey, one of the 7 habits of highly effective people, he says, begin with the end in mind. So I think it's so important for all of us, whether you're creating a venture, you're a school teacher, you're raising a family, you're leading a nonprofit. It's an important exercise, I think, in life to continually think about where you want to end up. And so as we begin an idea, as we begin a project, as we begin a venture, we're always thinking about beginning with the end in mind. But we see it, all across the United States and elsewhere. The companies we work with, they have issues with retention. They have issues with workplace culture. They have issues with leadership development. And I think a lot of that, so much of that stems from a person's or a group of people's inability to think long-term. And if you think long-term, it oftentimes affects your daily decisions, right? And so if you can get people to commit to a long-term future, they're more likely to go through the grind or make the smaller, tougher decisions. And it's that simple adage of there's either the pain of discipline or the pain of disappointment, right? And so if you can handle the pain of discipline in life, you won't have to handle the pain of disappointment. And so we're challenging that thought process and that mantra every day.
Yeah, that's interesting. So do you think then one of the other things that lacks within companies or adds to that issue is the fact that there's not a unified goal? So they don't have an end in mind. Not everyone does. So for example, the CEO and the executives of McDonald's might have, but then the person who's in the drive-through has no idea. They're just thinking about the next 60 seconds. They're not, they don't have to think about the next 20 years, but at least when they're doing their job on a day-to-day and making the daily decisions that they have that goal in mind. Is that something else that you think is missing?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And oftentimes the goal can be simple, right, V? So oftentimes we think about, a company's mission has to be this grandiose thing, right? But the goal, like one of our goals, as a company and as an organization, is just to allow people to feel appreciated every day, right? So Harvard Business Review just did a study that says 79% of people leave their employer because they felt a lack of appreciation. So how simple is that? If we spend 60 seconds on making sure that our people feel appreciated every single day, we can radically change retention and radically change our culture. So that would be one of the things that we fight for every single day. It's a mission that unifies us and brings us together. So I think you hit the nail on the head. Is oftentimes somebody just lacks, they lack a unifying mission or vision that keeps a cohesive culture where people stay together and stick together over time.
Yeah, that's a powerful point there, because they mentioned that, I think his name is Dale Carnegie, mentions that in How to Win Friends and Influence People, where he talks about one of the
Right.
things being showing appreciation. And it sounds so simple, but the stories he tells in there are very effective, just by you listening and showing a bit of, please and thank you, and a bit of the time that you spend showing that you're attentive to that person, just gives them that much more of a, of an upboost feeling. It's that cliche quote that you hear about, you're born to treat the CEO and the janitor in the same way. That's
Right.
exactly what it is. So can you give some practical tips of things so if you go into a company and you see this being an issue, what would some of the practical examples you'd give for people to show more appreciation? And then how can we use that outside the corporate environment for our own friends and family?
Yeah, that's a powerful question. So this is a strategy that we recommend if it's not already being implemented. This is a strategy that we would recommend for any organization that we work with. Super practical, it costs nothing, and you can implement it right away. I do think somebody needs to own it. So as I say this to listeners, I'll preface it with somebody needs to own the strategy to make sure it gets done every single day. And it's the power of the third party plug. And here's what I mean by that. V, if you and I are working together and I share with you a compliment, I say, hey, Vipul, I've really been impressed with how hard you've been working lately. You're really moving the needle at work. You're treating people well. Man, I've been so impressed with your work ethic. You would receive that from me. But if there's strings attached and I'm in a position of leadership, it's not going to be received the same way as if you hear it from a coworker. And the coworker says to you, hey, Vipul, I was talking to Jordan, and man, Jordan had some really good things to say about you. It was a small conversation. It was a kind of a one-off comment, but he really thinks a lot of you, man. He said you're really growing. You're treating people the right way. He's really impressed with your work ethic. Now there's a spirit of authenticity in that message that's totally different than if I shared that with you organically or directly, right? And so we make sure we set up a system where each person hears objectively and hears third party from somebody else that someone else sent a message on their behalf, and it hits home in a totally different way. So you could set that up where you make sure that every person, now it takes time to do this, okay? You have to have a system in place. You have to have somebody that owns it. But let's say you have an organization of 12 people. Well, you would make sure that every month somebody is going to hear positive praise from somebody else in the workplace, not you directly, but somebody else in the workplace, or maybe somebody outside the workplace, about someone in the workplace and a message that they wanted to send. And when it lands third party and it comes from a different source, it's a lot more powerful than if it hits directly. So that's something that we manage, that we implement, that we want other companies to implement. It's called the power of the third party plug. So where could that be seen outside? I think if you're a part of a nonprofit, if you're part of a church, any organization, I think that it works, right? Somebody has to own it and you have to track it. The whole goal, though, is not to tell somebody you have a strategy around that, right? You have to be authentic with how you deliver that. So the last thing we want somebody to think is, well, geez, they conjured up this grand plan or this strategy to share that I'm appreciated. And it's not that. It's just, hey, we've got people that we need to thank and appreciate. And so let's find a way to do that that's authentic and winsome. It doesn't mean that we can't share things directly. We should do that too. But I think it's so incredibly powerful if it comes third party. It costs nothing. You can implement it right away, and it radically changes workplace culture and retention.
So yeah, it seems like then that the whole idea of a unified goal comes down to affecting it at the cultural level.
That's right.
trying to make changes at a base level where it affects people from the bottom all the way to the top, basically, and that it's a company wide rather than just a few individuals handling the strategy.
That's right.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So then before you came up with this and you got involved with, helping companies in this sort of way, what was life looking like before all of this?
Yeah, I just a small town Iowa kid, and so I had a pretty humble beginning and background. I was raised kind of in a farming community, went to school, and I just wanted to be an entrepreneur. So my idea of getting a 4-year degree was I just wanted to get as much experience as I could, learning from people around me, get a degree, and then start a business, right? I had no capital to start a business. Mom and dad weren't going to give me $1, and they didn't really have $1 to give. And I had zero experience or knowledge. So I launched into the financial planning business. It was an opportunity where I could be in business for myself, but not by myself. So I had other people to come to the table that would support me and provide the mentorship and sort of the teaching and training that was necessary for me to get my business off the ground. And as I started to do that, we grew a culture that was really robust and a culture where people became deep friends, and we had results that were off the charts. Credit to a lot of the great people that I had the privilege of leading with. And so that led then to a career in consulting where we were getting asked a lot of questions specifically about how to develop millennial talent. In the year 2020, 50% of America's workforce will be millennials. And that generation oftentimes I think gets tagged as self-interested or lazy. I would argue that it's maybe the most creative and most talented generation the world's ever seen. But helping a company understand how to tap into that talent and that creativity is the key. So I became really passionate about developing millennial talent, about helping organizations understand how to lead millennial talent, how to attract the talent, retain talent, and develop talent. And so my life's work is dedicated to that these days. And it's the thing that I love more than anything else.
That's amazing. So do you think that's come about because you were trying to find your own place in the world as you were growing up in your teens and in your 20s for you to then go and help people of that age later on?
Yeah, I think so. I think I just started to realize that so many of the traditional ways that we try to move the needle in business or achieve results don't work like they used to, And I think about some of the teaching or training that I had from my parents or mentors that were maybe of a different generation. I just think about how that landed or resonated with me versus somebody that was maybe of the millennial mindset or the millennial generation. We also we really tested things. We tested what's going to help a young person move the needle, what's going to help a young person stay with a company, what's going to help the young person think more deeply about their future. And, we just started to experiment, what that looked like and how do we do that in the best way possible. And through a lot of the, just life experience and through some of our own research, through a bunch of mistakes, we learned that there are some key strategies for attracting, developing, and retaining millennial talent.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think everyone has to go through their own journey of understanding, the things that they may not have felt comfortable with in their lives. As you said, you were brought up with certain traditions and certain things that were told to you that just didn't feel or sit quite right, So I guess that's what then has turned your mindset into, what you've now cultivated over time. And the advice that you now share is probably advice that you probably hoped that you got when you grew up, as you were growing up, but you didn't get, because that wasn't the product of the time back then. So
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
But now that obviously you've got to where you are now, there's one interesting question that I had is because I saw on your website as I was looking through some of your bio and some of the stuff that you did, you had a quote on there at the top, and I'm curious to find out why you specifically chose that one about some people dream about success, others wake up and work. And to me, obviously there's a few different ways you can take that, but I'm interested to understand why you chose that in particular.
Yeah. So I'm going to pick on my guy, Simon Sinek. He's a brilliant mind. I love Simon. I love his stuff. I love his material. Simon Sinek wrote a book called Start With Why, and you may be familiar. Mm-hmm. It's a great book, and it's, I think, an amazing concept. We brought Simon in to speak at an annual event. He did a phenomenal job. I think he's a phenomenal human. But I keep reminding young producers and young talent that the title of the book is called Start, keyword Start With Why. And so as we started to coach and train some incredibly talented people, these are people that are leading Fortune 500 companies. These are producers who are at the very top of their game. I kept running into this often. If they didn't say it directly, they were saying it indirectly. And what they were saying was, I don't fully understand my purpose, or I don't fully understand my mission. And then sometimes they just say it directly, and it became kind of almost a mantra. And it was, I'm not sure I understand my why. Really, really, really important if you're going to attack anything in life to understand why you're doing it. So what Simon Sinek said was brilliant. But what he said was start with why. He didn't say start something, do it for several months or several years, and then stop and think about why you're doing it. And then start doing it again and then stop and think about why you're doing it. He said start with it. And so I think I just used that quote, V, because it speaks to taking action. It speaks to the grind that exists for all of us. One of my philosophies or beliefs in life is that and everything that you really enjoy doing, there'll be some part of it that you don't enjoy. I think about what you're doing right now, right? Like you enjoy, you've clearly built an amazing brand. I love the Know Your Legacy brand. I love the work that you're doing. What time is it in London right now?
Nearly 10:30 p.m.
10:30 p.m. So you worked a full day, correct?
Yeah.
And then you reached out to this guy in Iowa whom you've never met face to face. And here you are on a podcast and you're learning and getting better and working hard. And while you might really enjoy your work, I know you enjoy your work, you're committed to your work. There's other things you could be doing at 10:30 at night, right? But you are committed to your work and you're getting better. So you're a perfect example of somebody that, really probably enjoys their work. You're heavily invested in your work, but there's got to be certain parts of your work that you don't enjoy. So instead of just dreaming about what's possible, you're taking action and you're putting things into motion, right? You have a great following already. I can't wait to see Vipple's following 2 or 3 years from now, right? But it's because of long obedience in the same direction. It's the simple things done every single day that are sometimes seemingly mundane, but you continue to work every day and you get up and you attack your vision versus just sitting around and thinking about it.
Of course, yeah. The last thing that you said, there was quite a few interesting things you've touched on there that I want to cover, but just the last bit that you said there was there definitely 100% is areas that you don't enjoy doing and that I don't particularly enjoy. But the thing that keeps it together is the why. So the main thing that I've complained about, or I wouldn't say complained about, but that I feel like I could improve in my life a lot more is, the time that I spend sleeping or the time that I spend exercising isn't as much as it was when my hours weren't as hectic. I'm not able to give as much time and attention to that area of my life, but that's the area that I don't enjoy so much, but that's what I have to give up. You have to balance it somewhere. If I work long hours during the day, I'm out the house before 7 a.m. and then I get home at 8:30, and then within 2 hours of eating, showering, and doing a few bits and pieces around the house, I'm live with you, and
That's
then
right.
I'll be going to sleep around midnight and then start the whole thing again. So it is what it is. But then because of the why, I can't waste time. Every time I feel like I've got a spare moment, I'll listen to a podcast, I'll listen back to one of my recordings, I'll watch a documentary, I'll read a book. There's always something to grow and progress your mind. And when you get into the flow state of doing that, it becomes a momentum that just compounds, and you can't stop because you become addicted to becoming better. So
That's right. I love that. I love that. And see, I think like you're a classic example of somebody who understands the paradox of education, right? So it's like the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know.
Exactly.
And I'm always, when I walk into a workplace, I can almost always tell the top performers within the first 60 to 90 seconds. And it's usually the people that are taking notes on our presentation. So as we start our presentation, we do a lot of keynote speaking and presenting. And there's always the people, they're typically at the front of the room. They typically have a notepad out. And I don't know that they're the best because of how they look or anything they've said. They're taking action. And I believe champions take copious notes. So they're focused on learning. And John Wooden has this quote. He says, it's what you learn after you know it all that counts. He says, it's what you learn after you know it all that counts. And I love that. And again, you're an example of that. You're a young man who's got a brilliant podcast with a strong following, but you're obsessed with getting better. And in your downtime, you're spending time getting better and absorbing knowledge and digesting information. And so, again, man, just want to say hats off to you and a credit to getting better and choosing to improve every day.
No, I appreciate that. And it's people like you that inspire me to keep going on and keep ticking on, because, it's more about the going back to the purpose point that you made now. I can't say that I know 100% what mine is, but there's I posted this quote on my personal page, actually, I have a deep sense of hunger to make some change in the world. And I know that by recording conversations that are authentic like this and sharing knowledge that people may not usually have access to, it's going to change someone's way of thinking or someone's way of taking action. And if it's just one person, then I know I've done my job. And it sounds cliche, but to me, when you come into that level of consciousness where you think about more than just yourself, and you don't care about, how much sleep am I getting? How much money am I making? How much, X, Y, and Z? It's all about you. When it becomes more than just you and your message, then all of those things come back to you as a byproduct, which is weird, but that's how it works. When you, I think, who said this quote? There was someone who said this quote. I can't remember the exact. I think it was Zig Ziglar. When you give enough people what they want, you get what you want.
Yeah.
And I love it. So yeah.
That's great.
So yeah, man, that's where I'm at. So I'm in terms of, focusing it back on you and turning this question on you now. What do you think your purpose is, and how did you go about figuring it out, if you have already? Maybe it's something you're still unfolding.
Yeah. Well, I think it is an important conversation to have with yourself on an ongoing basis. I just think it's really important to get firm on your purpose and to spend some significant time there before you start something new. So going back to, Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why, the title of the book is Start. So just to spend a lot of time there thinking about what you're doing before you do it, I think is important. Once you're doing that thing, then I think coming up for air and thinking about why I'm doing that thing and can I do it differently, or am I doing it for the same reasons that I was doing it before? I think it's an important question. So for example, I got married in January. I married into kids. So my wife had 2 children. So I'm learning how to be a father and a husband at the same time. And there's a steep learning curve, right? And I really enjoyed that process. But certainly my why and my purpose has changed over the past year. It would be ignorant and probably not very good if I said that my purpose wasn't any different than it was, 2 years ago or 3 years ago. But I think my overall purpose, maybe more than anything else in my life, is I think, God gave all of us certain gifts that are unique. And I think for me, he gave me certain gifts that I want to steward well. I want to learn how to steward those gifts well, how to put those gifts to use. And for me, that's enough of a why to wake up every day and live life to the fullest and give it my all and do my best. And I think it's probably the most profound why for me personally that I could ponder or think about to give it everything I've got every day.
Yeah, for sure. So first off, congratulations. I didn't know you got married earlier this year. So yeah. But yeah, in terms of, what you mentioned there as well, you said that, I think 2 or 3 years ago, your purpose may not have been the same. So I was going to ask you, do you think purpose is something that evolves over time as we raise our level of consciousness and over time, what we realize, what we don't actually know, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think it does for sure. I think again, it goes back to the paradox of education, right? The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. So when I started my business, right, as a 22-year-old self-interested millennial, I was pretty focused on myself. But as I've grown older, I've learned that my life experiences aren't meant just for me, right? That our story is meant to be shared. And the minute I think that we start to think our story is about us or our life experiences are meant for us to get better, that's true. They're meant for us, right? But they're also meant for others, and the vehicle that you're using to share stories, Vipul, is a perfect example of that. So you've got all these people that are coming on your show that are talking about their life experience and their story. And I would hope that through me sharing and through the other folks that you've interviewed, as they share, that it's having significant impact on the lives of many people. And so I think, for me, one of the big revelations was that my story isn't just about me. It's about other people. And I've learned to become maybe a little bit less self-interested and a little bit more abundant with my thinking. I'm still working on that. I think as human beings, oftentimes we are self-interested people. And I think we have to continue to work at that every day. I'd love to tell you that I'm great at thinking about others before myself, but oftentimes I catch myself in situations where I wish I was more abundant. I wish I was more others focused. Something I have to continue to think about on a regular basis. Maybe that sounds cynical, but it's an authentic, honest answer.
Yeah, no, that's all I ask for. That's all I ask for, because it's true. That's the only way for people and listeners to connect to as well. Because if you're sharing something that just seems magical or glorified, then most people expect that, and then they don't connect with you because they think, oh, he's perfect, just like everyone else. He's got it all. He's got it all figured out. But when you actually get to the crux of it, you realize that everyone is facing their own issues. Regardless of if you're starting out or if you're 20 years in the game, 50 years in the game, every level has a new devil, as they say. So there's always a different problem to solve. And I have this conversation with my dad now as well from time to time when I catch him. We're listening to like stories of unfortunate events that may have happened to celebrities or certain issues, even in extended family, where people who are sort of quote unquote wealthy or have more materialistic things in their life. And then he says, oh, what do they have to worry about? Why are they bickering about X, Y, and Z? And I'm thinking, just because they have money doesn't mean they don't have problems. They just have a different set of problems, right? So that they just have to face different challenges in life. So I think everyone has their own perspective, and that perspective evolves over time as you go through life. And so, as you said, I think your purpose then also evolves as your perspective changes. I know that's been the case for me, and it seems like that's been the case for you since you were 22. Obviously, you're not thinking about things in the same way.
That's right. Yeah, and I think challenges and I think adversity changes that too. Vipul, I'm sure you could relate. I think oftentimes it sounds cliche, right? But we grow in valleys. We oftentimes don't grow in mountaintop seasons, right? We grow in the valley when maybe life isn't so great. But I think it's the people that embrace adversity that really end up with sometimes the coolest story, but also they can have the greatest impact. I think about, one example would be a young woman born into poverty in Mississippi. She was born to a single mother. She was molested as a teenager. She became pregnant when she was 14 years old. Her child died in infancy. Today, that woman is worth $2.8 billion. She's one of the most influential women in the world. Her name's Oprah Winfrey. I think about another guy born into an abusive household. His parents got divorced when he was 7. His mom would go on to remarry 3 different times. He had no formal training or education. He worked as a janitor when he was 18 years old. And today he's one of the most sought after speakers in the world. He owns 33 different companies that generate last year $6 billion in annual sales. And that guy's name's Tony Robbins. I think about another type of adversity. This one's a little different, but it's a challenge nonetheless. So again, born into single mom. So kind of a theme here. In the state of Ohio, not a lot of education, no formal mentors, never really had a father figure. At 18 years old, he was handed $420,000 a week. So I don't know about you or our listeners, but I would struggle if I was handed $420,000 a week, especially if I didn't have a background with a lot of mentorship and training and education. So today, fast forward several years, today that individual is paid $2 million a week. He's one of the most influential people in the world, certainly one of the most influential athletes in the world, and his name is LeBron James. And so I think about those individuals and their ability to embrace adversity, to be different, to be unique, to own their story, and to not let life prevent them or their challenges prevent them from getting to where they want to go. So I think we have a tremendous opportunity to embrace adversity, to own our own story. And to the extent that we can do that, it oftentimes determines our success.
That's interesting. I'm glad you shared those stories because it just shows you from these individuals come from humble beginnings whereby they face, what sounds like a lot worse than what the average person would face. And then yet they're still able to rise. So in your opinion, then, from speaking to the individuals and organizations and the people that have influenced you in your life, what is it that sets these guys apart? So for the listeners that are facing some sort of adversity or uncertainty in their life, what would you say are maybe 2 or 3 things that you can share that would help them mindset wise to handle these sorts of things?
Yeah, I think there's 3 questions that are really powerful to ask when going through a difficult situation, V. I think one would be, who else can benefit from the event that I'm dealing with or going through? So the first question would be, who else could benefit from the event or the thing that I'm going through? Number 2 is, what did I learn? And number 3 is, what did I gain? So I think in those scenarios, we can answer those questions almost always. There's always somebody that can benefit from our story or our experience. There's almost always something we can learn. And there certainly is always something to be gained. Even in dire circumstances, I think the people who really get on with life, who accomplish a lot in life, are people that are committed to answering those 3 questions over and over and over again. Sam Walton, who started Walmart, has a fascinating story, and he was well known for his ability to see the best even in the worst of situations. So his number 2 guy, his right-hand man, traveled the country with him back in the heyday of department stores, and when Walmart was really starting to explode, and they would travel to different cities, and they would stop on their way to these cities at various department stores along the way. And it's well documented in one of their visits, I believe in a small town in Arkansas, they stopped at a family-owned department store. And so the story is told through the eyes of this number 2 guy. And he says, it was interesting. We walked through this department store, and it was one of the worst department stores that I had ever been in. It was unorganized, didn't smell right. They were understaffed. The people that they did have working there weren't the most well kept. It was just, there was a lot of things wrong with the store. And he said, we got back into the car in the parking lot, and I looked to Sam and I said, I just can't believe that store. And then he listed a bunch of different things that was wrong with it. And Sam Walton said back to him, he said, yeah. He said, but did you see the way they had their cosmetic stand set up? And the way that they had their cosmetic stand set up, the display that they chose to use was the display that Walmart then took on for years moving forward. And that display, the way that they do that display still stands today. So Sam Walton's ability to see the good in all situations was truly profound. And I think that's a microcosm, or it's a small example for us of how we ought to live life and how we ought to address situations and events in our life, and especially when we are in situations that aren't ideal or we go through adversity. What an awesome example of somebody who chose to see the good consistently in the situations that maybe weren't all that great. And so One of the things I've tried to do, really hard to do, right? Everybody wants to talk about the story. Very few people want to go through it. So easier said than done. But if you can ask yourself those three questions, who else can benefit? What did I have to learn? And what did I gain? Three really critically important questions to answer on a regular basis.
Amazing. No, that's some really good advice. And I hope that people take something away from that and actually sit and reflect on that, especially if they're going through something right now, because there's always, good and bad in every situation. It just determines, it's just based on, what your outlook is of the perspective. And I had this conversation to myself as well. I as weird as it sounds, I do like to talk to myself because it helps me bring out the thoughts that are in my mind and then, put it all out in front of me. And yeah, things just become a lot clearer. So doing that or just writing it out in a journal, that helps also as well. So, but yeah, what actually fascinates you at this point in your life now?
What fascinates me? People like you who do podcasts, people who are, obsessed with getting better and they want to learn and they're always, trying to get better and asking great questions. One of my mentors, he said, a question that he always tries to ask is what makes you great? When he's hanging out with people that he really respects. And so it's a powerful question. What makes you great? I think it's a tough question to answer. I might ask you this question, V, here in a second, but with people you respect, I think when you're around somebody you really respect, go deep, ask questions and be obsessed with getting better. And I guess I'm fascinated with people who are obsessed with getting better. So I'm going to spin that question back to you, V. I want to know two things. One is what fascinates you. And then two is what makes you great.
Now, okay, so this is becoming your show now. But yeah, so what fascinates me? So it's a good question. Some of these questions I ask people I haven't even thought about myself. They just come to me.
And you don't have to answer. I put you on the spot. So.
No, it's good. So I think generally seeing how the world is going to unfold in the coming years, because I think so many more people now are waking up to the fact that, what we were talking about earlier about old traditions and old education systems and, old ways of working, those things are starting to become out of date and people are realizing that now slowly. Some of it is coming out in the form of complaints. So people are moaning and groaning about it and, just complaining. But they recognize that that's not the right way to do things anymore. But then you get those people who realize that they don't complain and they take action. Those are the ones that we're talking about who then go on to become legends because they take the action. But generally, I see more and more people waking up to the fact that, hang on, there's a better way to live. Yeah. So I'm going to now ask questions and people are becoming more and more curious about what else is out there. So I'm just interested to see how the world is going to unfold, because if we see the last decade and what the internet has done to the way that we live and work. My dad, for example, only, took on and embraced technology over the last few years. And, because of his sons, because we use technology all the time. So naturally, he's become a part of that. And just today he was, he was in the kitchen making a bit of food and I was eating, before this podcast, I was just eating, thinking about sort of questions I want to ask you and just reflecting with a bit of silent time. And all I hear in the background was, "Hey Siri, play my playlist." And I was like, "Dad, what are you doing?" So it's amazing to see how the world is unfolding. So that's the thing that fascinates me at the moment, just watching that. And the second thing, what makes me great. So I think personally for me, is the number one characteristic that helps me elevate through any situation is curiosity. It's just constantly asking questions. What if? Not what if in a bad way, as in what if I'd done this in my life? What if, as in what's possible? What if I do this? What else can I do? What if I actually took this risk and did that? What if I make that jump? What if I make that investment? What if I reach out to that person? There's nothing to lose. And that's why, I've built what I've built so far. It may not be where it needs to be, but it's because I've asked the question, what I enjoy speaking to people. What if I start a podcast? What if I reach out to one person? What if I ask him to introduce me? What happens? My network grows, becomes bigger, and then the possibilities open up. So yeah, that's
wonderful. I like that. Great answer. Yeah. I might steal that from you. I promise.
No, that's what we're here for, to learn and grow from each other.
Great. So, amen. That's right.
I'm glad you found value in it. So to wrap this up, just to finish up with the final few questions. Just before I get into those, there's 3 questions I ask everyone, but I just wanted to ask you. So it seems like you've gained a lot of perspective and insight, from everything you've done up to now, in your life, where do you see yourself going now? Not in the sense of, from 5-10 years sort of plan, but I mean, where do you feel you want to be heading in the next few years or few decades even?
It's a great question. Well, first and foremost, whatever I do, I want to make sure that it attributes to my goal of being a great husband and a great father. We get asked that question a lot in life about, our coaching clients. Here's one question we get all the time, that we get the question of, should I take this new job? We get asked about career decisions all the time. And the question I ask back to everybody that asks that question to me is a question I don't think they're prepared for, which is, well, does it attribute to helping you become a better father, a better husband? And so I think I have to ask myself those questions when I think about what I want to accomplish professionally. Is first and foremost, does it serve my family well? And so that's a question that I want to continue to ask myself. And sometimes when I think about what I want to do professionally, I go, that sounds great. I just recently got asked to speak at a conference, really wanted to do it, but it conflicted with my daughter's birthday. And that's one of the things that I'm not going to compromise. I'm going to be here for my family. And so I had to say no to it. And it was hard, to say no. I really want to say yes to it. I would have loved to have been there, but I want to stay committed to my family first and foremost. So I think, my future, continuing to learn and grow as a father and as a husband, as a strong community member. We want to continue to grow our company and have greater impact, to work with people in a deeper way, to continue to create leverage so we can reach more people. Really the thing that probably energizes me more than anything is speaking. So I love to speak to organizations, big and small. For me, it's a blessing to be on a stage or to have any kind of a message to share. So just would, continue to seek life experience and learn from those experiences. I want to continue to have mentors, great people around me that ask challenging questions and help me think deeper about my future. People like you, Vipul. And so, sort of a vague answer, not by design, but I also want to keep an open hand with my future. As long as I'm having an impact, I get to do the things that I love, sharing my life with people and helping to lead my family. I think I'll be in a good spot.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good answer. And I wouldn't call it vague in a bad way. I think vague is good because it sounds like, you have this feeling of having impact, but you're not quite sure what form it might take, because I guess the form evolves over time. You weren't always speaking the way that you speak or get invited to speak, maybe compared to when you were 25. So I guess it always changes, but I'll definitely say you're on the way to, well on your way to doing that. So congrats on everything that you've achieved so far.
Thank you, my friend. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, same to you.
So just to wrap up with the last few questions. So with everything you've learned so far and, how far you've come in your journey, is there anything different you'd tell the 18-year-old Jordan?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a really good question. I think just to, not take life so seriously. Oftentimes we go through experiences, and again, it sounds cliche, but so many times as setbacks are set up, you have to take a step back to take 3 forward. Sometimes when it feels like the world is caving in around you or you're losing everything, there's a lot to be gained. So I think, I'm pretty emotional. Like, I cry when I watch like Extreme Home Makeover. Like, it doesn't take a lot to make me emotional. And so there's a lot of times in my life where I've gone through events and it's really affected me. And I think if I could go back and talk to the 18-year-old version of me, I would just say, learn from experiences and count them as a blessing. There's going to be something to be learned from everything that you go through. I would spend more of my time, Vipul, with the right people. The adage of like the person you become is largely attributed to the books that you read and the people you hang out with. I would go back and tell the 18-year-old that they are never as connected. They may never be connected in the same way they are connected from 18 to 22. When they're in college and their social network is huge. Now, if they work at that, hopefully they'll continue to be more connected. but to take advantage of learning all that you can from the amazing people around you and spending time with the right people. I think that's something else I would offer up to the 18-year-old version of me.
Nice. No, that's definitely good advice, because I think we take it for granted when we're in those sort of social settings at the time, especially if we're at university or college. We don't realize, the resources we have at our fingertips at the time, until it's when we step outside of that, and then we reflect back on our experiences. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So second question: if there's anything that you could write, just a sentence that you could write on a piece of paper that's going to be put in a time capsule for generations from now to read, what would that sentence be?
You asked these good questions. These are good. These are really good. Yeah, I think I would. What would I write? There's a lot of things I that come to mind. I think I would write something about legacy. Like, I love the Know Your Legacy brand. Something attributed to legacy. I think about living life to your full potential and not letting there be any music left inside of you, like just leaving it all on the field. I don't know how I'd summarize that in a simple sentence. But I might just honestly answer it with 2 words. It would just be great. Be great. And just go back to, we've all been given gifts. I think it's the greatest opportunity we have in life is to use those gifts and to steward them well. For me, it's the only purpose I need in life, is to know that at the end of my life, I've used my gifts, stewarded those gifts well, and I've used them on other people. So it's a simple answer, but it's one that for me really resonates, just to be the best version of you and to be great.
Yeah, for sure. It's a powerful message. So just to wrap up it with the final question then, what's the legacy you want to leave behind?
Yeah. I think for me, and it's probably come across in this conversation, I care a lot about my faith and my family. I want to leave the world better than I found it. I'd really like to change my community. I would like people in general to be more open-minded. I would like there to be more progressive thought process with how we approach relationships, with how we approach community, with how we approach business, certainly, and leadership. So I think I just want to be known as somebody who, more than anything, that will treat people well, And it gets back to what you said about serving people well. If you can serve people well, ultimately someday you'll be served. And if I could be known for that, I think that'd be a great way to leave Earth, to leave the planet. So.
Yeah, that's an honorable thing to say. So yeah, you're definitely, as I said before, you're on the path to definitely making that happen with the impact that you're currently having and where your mind is at for the future. So it's been a pleasure having you on, Jordan. I've definitely learned a lot from you. So thanks for taking the time.
Well, I appreciate your time too, V. And I've got a small ask for you. If you just say hi to our followers, I would appreciate it greatly. And so I'm just gonna load up my phone here real quick, and you can just say a quick hello. It did mean a lot to us.
Yeah, go for it. Hi, guys. Hi, guys. Hope everyone's doing well. It's been amazing having Jordan on.
All right. Thanks for your time, V. I really appreciate it.